Segment 3, Gold and Black Live, and when you get done with Frank, you get a lot of information out there, and Frank is a unique guy, and to say the least, and it's going to be a big night in terms of the Hall of Fame, and you have David Bodie in that group as well. That is impressive. Brian, recruiting, a lot of angst, I guess, though it's funny in terms of things to have a way of working out, but Purdue's men's basketball, it's going to kind of come to a head, and you're still waiting for that first shoe to drop, so to speak, in terms of that. Yeah. I know you've answered this question 100 times, you get tired of having to answer it, but when is that shoe going to drop?
Well, I apparently only get 5 minutes. I see how it is. So I'll try to be concise.
No, we've already asked for 5 more. So
I get asked every day when Purdue's going to get a commitment, and I want to know just as much as you do.
Yeah.
I want to do something. You know, I spent the whole summer watching these guys. I want to write stuff about the players Purdue is getting. They're not getting any players.
Yeah.
I don't think it's out of the ordinary. There are a lot of schools out there right now who don't have commitments, Michigan State among them, just to name one.
Yeah.
But obviously Purdue would like to have somebody on board by now, if not a couple of people.
Sure.
You know, Purdue had a pretty big official visit weekend a couple weeks ago. They had a very big unofficial visit prior to that, which served as one of Jaren Jackson's last visits. So there are some guys fully in decision-making mode here, fully into the visit process. It just hasn't happened for Purdue yet. It's happened for a lot of other people, just hasn't happened for Purdue yet. But at some point in time, the levee's going to break, and Purdue's going to get somebody, and then somebody else, and then somebody else, and then somebody else, and then maybe somebody on top of that.
Yeah. And then you'll have something more to write.
And then I'll have something to do, because right now I'm just sitting here doing this.
No, I don't think that's the case from that standpoint. One of the things that this week in Boilermaker Athletics, so to speak, we spent Wednesday with Mike Babinski and his inaugural press conference. We obviously been on the set with him a week ago and been in front of him a couple of times. Talked about it on our Gold and Black Express radio, but what was your, now 48 hours removed, what are you seeing in him, and what reaction do you have in terms of what kind of shop is he going to run as athletic director at Purdue?
I see a personality, I see a pragmatist, and I see experience, and that's a pretty good combination. You know, he seems like he's taking a very positive approach to all of this. I think he's probably by now has a pretty good idea what he's getting into, but he's seems to be at least saying all the right things in terms of, you know, Purdue's potential and what Purdue can be capable of, and how he wants the people who work for him and work around him to be thinking. And that's that Purdue is capable of anything. We've talked a lot about some of the realities at Purdue, some of the competitive inconveniences and whatnot, but he seems like somebody who's going to want everybody around him thinking big. And I think that's obviously valuable for any position of leadership, but especially at a place like a college athletic department.
Yeah, and a guy that has that doesn't seem to be too ruffled by anything, but he also knows that it's going to take some time to evaluate and figure out. He said I think he's well on his way to figuring out what he has, but he's also doesn't seem to be in a big hurry to jump into anything from that standpoint. Is that your impression?
Well, he obviously has to get acclimated to the place he's overseeing before he can make any sort of drastic changes. He's going to have an opportunity to put a pretty distinct stamp on this place, because obviously when you've been under the leadership of one person for so long, things get done a certain way. And institutionally, Purdue kind of is what it is. It's kind of had a way of doing things. This is an opportunity here for him to take some things, maybe not everything. There are some things Purdue does, well and has going for it. But this is an opportunity for him to take some things that have been done a certain way a very long time and take them in a little bit of a different direction. And it'll be interesting to see how some of those things, and I'm speaking generally, of course, it'll be interesting to see how some of those things, get implemented and work out eventually.
You obviously get the distinct pleasure of writing our commentary on our Gold and Black Express or blogging on down the line. Purdue football this weekend, we've hit it in segment 1 about the importance of this game. It's hard to minimize where the importance of this game, because it is a game that Purdue's a 6-point underdog, but some people are looking at it and saying you like Purdue potentially in this one, and I haven't seen all our predictions yet, but from your perspective, Purdue needs to make a big reversal of what's happened the last few years in a game that it could potentially win today.
Yeah,
or
I mean,
tomorrow.
I don't know if you ever want to say a game on September 10th is
Yeah.
the game of the year, and we tend to engage in a little too much hyperbole that way, putting too much on particular games, but this is a gigantic game for Purdue. I don't think you can overstate it. You've got this game at home, this is a beatable opponent, you've just won a game. You have to do something this season. You have to do something from a self-preservation standpoint, from an engagement standpoint with your fans, just from a, to be honest with you, not being a national laughingstock perspective, you have to do something at some point. Purdue's been in this position before. You remember they had that fourth quarter rally of sorts at Michigan State last year when Michigan State was number 2 in the country. Come back the next week, everyone around Purdue thought they were going to beat Minnesota. Minnesota had a mash unit of a team, so many guys injured.
Right.
Purdue was set up right there to have that win that they've been looking for. Yes, it was Minnesota, but a win would have been a win. They faceplant. They just don't show up. They beat Nebraska a couple weeks later, the breakthrough moment. It seemed like of the Darrell Hazel era. Here's that big win you finally been looking for in Ross-Ade Stadium. Come out the next week, get absolutely punked out by Illinois, of all people. These aren't great teams you're losing to. It's not just that Purdue's been losing after wins, and there haven't been many wins, but it's not like Purdue's been losing after wins. It's not been showing up after wins, and that's absolutely inexplicable. Purdue has to play well Saturday. They have to win Saturday, really, because you've got to do something pretty distinct this year to give any sort of indication this is headed in the right direction. And if you can't beat Cincinnati at home in year 4 of this, I don't know what tone that sets for the rest of the season, but it certainly is not a good one.
Yeah, and it's going to be a game, too, that, it's hard to know what we saw in week 1, certainly with the Boilers win over Eastern Kentucky, but it's hard to know what we saw in Cincinnati, too. Football recruiting, and you've obviously paid close attention to that. Purdue's numbers are good. A lot of some injuries to some commits already. What's been your sense here in the last few weeks of where, and yet also, I know there are supposedly no official visitors tomorrow.
That I know of.
That we know
it's
of.
very possible to have somebody, but I'm not aware of it. And just because I'm not aware of it doesn't mean it's not.
Where do you think give us an assessment of where they are with that, especially considering the situation? Has anything really changed in the last couple of weeks?
I think Purdue's in pretty solid shape. I think they're off to a pretty good start from a numbers perspective. They've got more guys than they've had maybe ever at Purdue. This early. Now, Purdue's, when I say they're off to a good start, everything's relative. They're off to a good start by the standard of what they've been getting. I think they've gotten good kids. I think they've got some legitimate Big Ten guys. They've gotten some guys who would have been pretty attractive commodities in some of the classes Purdue's gotten before. They've got some guys who are legitimate. C.J. Hayes, the wide receiver, for example. Nick Sipe, the quarterback. These are good, legitimate Big Ten players. And I think Purdue's taken some guys, too, that a Big Ten team should be able to get whenever they want. But you're always going to have a little bit of that at a place like Purdue. But I think they're off to a good start. Obviously, Purdue knows better than anybody in college football that getting the commitment and getting the signature are two very different things. Purdue's, I hate to keep harping on the statistic, but it bears repeating, 15 decommitments in the last 3 recruiting classes, which is an astronomical number. So obviously Purdue's going to have some challenges that this recruiting year. There's going to be a lot of question about the future of the coaching staff and whatnot. So holding on to some of these guys is going to require some work. Obviously, it depends on who comes after these guys, if anybody does. But for the time being, at least, I think Purdue's got a pretty solid start to its class.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out and what happens when the Boilermakers, how this season plays out and what effect that may have on Purdue recruiting. All right, well, we'll be off next week because it is a bye week. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll be live at the Triple X, believe it or not. Mitch Daniels will be joining us, and we'll have our usual staff as well talking about the Purdue-Nevada game. And I want to thank our sponsors, Triple X. Tomorrow, that's the line from Hilton Garden Inn when tomorrow's a big day. Stay at HDI tonight. Triple X at Purdue, tradition since 1929. John Basham and the good folks at Basham Rentals. And then, of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson at TrentIsMyAgent.com. So we will look forward to seeing you. We went a little bit over today. We appreciate the WLFI gang hanging in with us. Cammie and Gordon and Allie on down the line. We thank you for that. We'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks on Gold and Black Live.